Hello, heathens! I'm Megan Angus, and this is Spinning the Wheel podcast. In this weekly audio ritual, we explore the 8 seasons of the witch's wheel of the year, and we discover how it is so much more than 8 Sabbats. We weirding witches time travel through holy days, festivals, and celestial events connecting our celebrations and magic to the past, present, and future. Our cackling fills the night as we take our turn gathering the wool, wielding the distaff, and spinning the wheel. Hello, and welcome back, my heathens, my witches, my pagans. My goodness, you all, I tell you what. I don't have to tell you, you know. How has this week been going for you? How has everybody been doing with our astrology transits as we hurtle down into the abyss, growing ever closer to the long night, the darkest and the lowest, the deepest point of the underworld journey as we approach winter solstice? How's everybody doing? Everybody okay? Is everybody doing okay? Is it spooky? Cool. Is it scary? Excellent. Is it exfoliating? Wonderful. We're right on track. We're right exactly where we should be. This season is tough, and this is a part of why I go in so hard on what it is that we're doing during Samhain season, because Samhain season gives us this incredible opportunity to call ourselves out on our BS, to really embrace the parts of ourselves that are yucky, that are uncomfortable, that are shameful, that feel guilty, and let them talk, let them speak, and then ultimately embrace them and give them a whole bunch of love. And they either are going to settle in and get a little more comfortable, or they are going to transmute and turn into something else, or they are going to begin to melt away, especially as we move through winter and the sun eventually comes back, but we're not quite there yet. As I was going off about last week, we are still in Samhain season. I know it's all ho-ho-tacular out there in the Western world. Everybody's got their red and white pom-pom hats on and all that business, but we are still in Samhain season for a few more days, a few more hours, couple more weeks, a little bit more of this before we begin our ascent up and out of the dark. So, before we get into all of that, let's get into this. My upcoming class is going to be Wheel of the Year Yule 2022, a guide to winter solstice. This is going to be a free live stream on YouTube, December 13th. You can head to my YouTube and subscribe to my channel, Megan Angus. And get notifications when that video is ready to go. Join us live for the class. If you want to give me a hard time in chat, or just say hi, that's fine too. You can also watch it through my website, and after the class, I will be uploading it here as a video and an audio file for you to watch or listen to and hear, being wherever it is that you partake of these podcasts. It'll be up on all the platforms. If this is a 2-hour lecture, if you're not familiar with what it is that I do, I go off, as the kids say. It's a 2-hour, more or less, lecture on the past and the present, and maybe even the future of winter solstice. We talk about the science, we talk about the planetary mechanics, we talk about migratory patterns and other biological rhythms that are happening here on Earth, and also we talk about the folklore, the myth, and the spiritual practices, the philosophical practices that have been built around those biological systems, as humanity's attempt to understand this incredible phenomenon that is the moment of winter solstice. What is it? What's it, what's it doing? Why is it happening? All of that good stuff. Winter solstice is truthfully one of the most important holiday moments in most religions in the Northern Hemisphere. Pretty, like, no exaggeration. Like, it really is a very pivotal moment, because of course, uh in the Northern Hemisphere, it appears that the sun is dying. It appears that the sun is going away, and the sun is more or less the life-giving, heat-giving, light-giving entity that we have all come to know and love here on ye old planet Earth, where most of us have lived our entire lives, as well as the entirety of our species. So it's intrinsically tied to our biorhythms. It's intrinsically tied to the life rhythms of animals and plants and fungi here on planet Earth. So it's kind of a big deal. And we humans have, in turn, created just an incredibly beautiful body of myth and folklore and belief and spiritual practice and cultural tradition, in an attempt to understand this, in an attempt to honor it and venerate it and teach each other about it and how to work with it. So that's, just that is all what we're going to talk about in the 2-hour class. It's going to be me going off. I've got lots of slides and all that good stuff. If that class is not enough information for you and you want even more information, like incense recipes, recipes for food and drink that you can make for the holiday, information about the astrology, information about all of the several many holidays that are celebrated around the world at and during winter solstice season, you can subscribe to my Patreon. Gigantic, massive, incredibly juicy, and inflamed. So put some cream on that. Thank yous to my patrons who support me in this work and make it possible for me to teach these classes for free. Fucking cool. So yeah, oops, I'm cursing. Yeah, I wasn't gonna curse in this one. I don't know why I made that decision, because we know that I'm not gonna stick to that. So anyways, thanks to my patrons. You guys are badass. And you make it possible for me to do this podcast for free, to teach those classes for free, and so much more. So if you want even more information than what is available in that 2-hour lecture, you can subscribe to my Patreon at the Venus level or higher, which is $9 or up, and it will get you access to the workbook, as well as a bunch of other stuff that patrons get. I do a seasonal playlist for every Sabbath. I put in a file for digital spells that you can download and put on your laptop, or I should say as a screensaver, but I also make a size that you can use on your phones. And other stuff. There's always some goodies in there. You never know what you're going to find. As well as everything else that I do on Patreon. Other seasonal writings on tarot, etc., etc. So big thanks to everybody who subs, and enjoy if you do sub, because there's a lot in there. Other ways that you can kind of keep track of what's going on and get extra information about things, you can head to my website, meganeggs.com, and join my newsletter in the contact section. Also, if you've got any questions or comments about things that you hear in the podcast, stuff that I talk about that maybe I don't fully explain, and you're like, what the hell is that supposed to mean? Send me a question. Let's talk about it. Follow me at all the places. You can follow me here, again, on whatever platform it is that you're listening to this podcast. You can follow me on YouTube, follow me on Instagram. I'm also on TikTok. I'm not super active on TikTok, but if you have a preference over Instagram versus TikTok, you can follow me on both. Again, as I said, I have a newsletter. Once again, I've already said massive thank you and shout out, but massive thank you and shout out to all of my incredibly wild, fabulous, sexy, delicious, wonderful, even you smell good patrons for making all of this ridiculous stuff possible for me. As I said last week, this has been a really wild year. A lot of folks have joined my Patreon, and folks that join at the sun level and higher can get free readings with me. a couple times a year up to every month if you are wanting to integrate this information into your life on a much more personal level. We can look at your transits to your natal chart. We can pull tarot, whatever it is. We can just talk about magic. If there's some magic work that you're curious about, spellcrafting, whatever, we can talk about that stuff too. As it stands currently, my books are full and they are closed. I am not currently taking any new clients for astrology or tarot readings through my website. The only folks that I am working with right now are patrons. That will change in the new year. I will reopen my books in a couple of months, but there is a little bit of a waiting list at this point. So again, join Patreon to kind of skip the line and all of that good stuff. Okay, that is enough of that. Let's get into the grist of this podcast. We are in Samhain season, full cold moon in Gemini, lunar week 43 by some lunar calendars. So, what have we got going on? Well, let me say this also, although I do say this frequently and then I lie. This is probably going to be a slightly shorter podcast than usual because some of the stuff that I would talk about in this podcast, I'm going to talk about in the Wheel of the Year class, in the Yule class. So rather than repeat myself, I'll keep each thing in its context. So some things we're not going to talk about this week, but let us definitely talk about this Gemini full moon. So, first off, this full moon is happening at 8:08. Hey, if you know, you know. 8:08 p.m. Pacific Standard Time at 16 degrees of Gemini, Wednesday the 7th. And this full moon has a bunch of different names. Cold moon is one of the more traditional ones. This is also known as the Christmas moon, the long night moon, snow moon, the moon before Yule. This is also sometimes called the 12th moon and oak moon, and it has a few other names beyond that. And we want to remember, and we'll talk about this type of stuff in the Yule class, but we want to remember that our full moons that happen in December are always going to be near the constellation of Gemini or Cancer, depending on if our full moon comes before the winter solstice or after the winter solstice. But it's always going to be near Gemini or Cancer for us. And, what is the stuff that we are doing with this full moon? Let's take a look at the astrology of this full moon. This particular full moon is, as I said, at 16 degrees of Gemini, and it is conjunct our Mars that is currently in or stationed retrograde in Gemini. So there's a lot of opinions about this moon. Go figure, right? It's in Gemini. There's a lot of thought. There's a lot of conjecture around what this full moon is doing to people or what it's representing for people. And so depending on where this is in your chart, depending on what it might be aspecting in your chart, this moon might be pulling up anger issues for you. You might be feeling really scattered. It might be very difficult to kind of collect yourself and stay focused. There might be a real emphasis on masculine energy around you, or even in you, whatever that means for you, because of that Mars element. But, pushing beyond gender stuff, Mars represents our anger, our drive, our lust. It represents where we feel offensive and defensive, and especially defensive when Mars is in retrograde. And so a lot of that stuff might be coming up with the full moon. When we have a full moon, it's a type of a culmination of our lunar process, but also it represents a time of the month where we might be feeling our emotions really strongly, whatever those emotions are. We might be more emotionally demonstrative or demonstrative than we normally are, whatever that means for us. And so for some people, that combination of stuff is really exciting. And for some people, that combination of stuff pulls up a place where we feel really defensive, or we feel really, um, like impatient or agitated about stuff. Um, we might be drawn to more dangerous situations than we usually are. Mars encourages our bravery and our boldness, but not necessarily our intelligence. um, and so we might be feeling really impulsive around what's happening here. And again, when you've got emotions involved, and like Mars, again, which is our lust and our libido and our sex drive, you might be getting into some fun but slightly risky situations. So do what you need to do to keep yourself safe or safer if you're out there playing and having a good time with other humans. Um, just prepare, right? Because in the moment, you might not be thinking clearly. Um, but beyond all of that stuff, from the most neutral standpoint, I think that this moon, if it feels right for us to do this kind of work, I think that this moon is incredibly powerful and helpful for us to have a moment where we kind of take a step back and we do an assessment of our passions, the nature of the things, the people, the stuff, the ideas, the goals, whatever it is that we lust after, that we drive for, that we strive for, the things that we go out into the world and get, or the stuff that we think we're supposed to be driving for or striving for. It's a fantastic time for examining your motivations. Um, it also could be an opportunity for the overly rational parts of us. That's Gemini. I know, Gemini, not traditionally referred to as overly rational. We love you, Geminis, but geez. Uh, but it might be a really great time for the overly rational parts of us to let go of control a little bit, right? You know you, right? I don't know you, although it may feel like I do. That weird parasocial thing, right? It's social media and the world of tech. It's a bizarre experience. Um, but you know where you're at in this. Are you feeling super clenched and super tight and super defensive right now? Maybe it's time to unclench and release and let some energy move through and get a little reckless. Whatever that means for you, in a safe way, don't sue me. Or are you a little reckless right now? Are you a little out of control? Are you agitated? Are you feeling super impatient? Maybe it's time to kind of simmer down a little bit and bring that energy not necessarily under control, but just examine it. Like, what's my gig? What's my deal right now? Am I okay? Like, what's going on? It might be a great time to run around the block or move a pile of bricks or take a couple of boxing classes, and just get some of that excess energy out in a place that's safe, that's intended for that. Again, coming back to sex and sexual contact with yourself and with other people, it might be a really great time for that, right? It's sweaty, it's fun, everybody's into it, that push pull, all of that good fun stuff. But again, plan for that, right? Like, do it in a way that's safe, and even safer than that. Take care of yourself out there. Again, this is a moon that's pretty spicy and it's got a lot of opportunity for things to go a little sideways, but it also has a lot of opportunity for us to really kind of take an assessment, right? Or take an accounting of, what am I pushing for? What am I striving for? What am I trying to accomplish in this life? And if we choose to do that work, what I want to encourage is this. I want to encourage you to take it a step further than that, because we've got some really fucking positive astrology in front of us. Is it all better? No. Do we still live on Earth? Yes. Does capitalism still exist? Uh-huh. Do we still have fascists running around acting like assholes? Mm-hmm. Yes. Right? So let's not forget the context. But we do have some pretty interesting and positive leaning astro signals coming in our soon and near and far future. And so, coming back to this full moon, if you are of a mind to do this sort of assessing or accounting and thinking about, what am I pushing for? What am I trying to achieve in this lifetime? Like, what am I trying to accomplish? What are my goals? What's my stuff that I'm pushing for? I really want you to think about what has worked and what has not worked in your life. I want you to think about the stuff that hasn't worked, right? Like, I've been pushing for this thing and it's just not panning out. Okay, well, maybe it's time to let that go. But I also encourage you to think about, what have you pushed for? What have you strived for that did work out, but it still wasn't as satisfying as maybe it could have been? And this is something that I've talked about with my clients this month a lot. And the reason for this is because, uh, again, we've got some really interesting astrology in front of us. And I really want to encourage you, if it's the right work for you to do right now, to kind of empty out, to clear the slate, to empty the cup out, and make room for this stuff that is coming at the end of this month and as we head into 2023. If that doesn't feel like work that makes sense for you, don't worry about it. Move on, do the thing. But if that does ring a bell for you, if that is hitting for you, explore that idea. What has worked, and can I let that go? What hasn't worked, and can I let that go? In a couple of days, we'll be challenged to move on some of that stuff too, which we'll get to here in a minute in the podcast. But that's the stuff. That's the stuff. How do I use my time? How powerful is my mind? And affirmations, walking the talk, all of that stuff kind of accumulating under the idea of what has worked for me and what has not worked for me, and how much of all of that stuff can I let go of. All of that stuff. Okay. The other thing that I want to say is this, for a little bit of a ritual moment with this Gemini moon. And there's more things I could say about the rest of the astrology with this moon, but I'm just not gonna. I will talk about some other stuff, though. I'm not going to talk about other stuff, but I am going to talk about other stuff. A little ritual moment for this Gemini full moon. And we have other times to do this too, this week and throughout the rest of the month as we move towards the next new moon. I encourage you to listen for, record, and receive on others' behalf messages and information from the multitudes of dimensions just beyond the veil. That is a very potent way to work with a full moon in Gemini. Listen for information that is coming in from other sources. And maybe that message is for you, and maybe that's a message for you to pass on to other people. Okay. The only other thing I want to say about this day is at 9:41 p.m., we have the sun opposing Mars in retrograded Gemini at 16 degrees, which of course makes sense because when we have a full moon, the sun and moon are in opposition to each other. If the moon is conjunct Mars, then the sun is going to be opposing Mars. And why I'm mentioning this as its own little aside is that this is the midpoint of the Mars retrograde cycle. So we are officially at the halfway point of the Mars retrograde cycle. Mars is going to station direct in January. So we're getting there. We're getting there. And again, same thing, same. Think about the house or the houses that are connected to Gemini in your chart. Look at where in your chart 16 degrees of Gemini hits, because that's where this is happening. And think about the conflicting ideas and the conflicting ideologies that are, current or existing in your life right now. How do you think about things versus how do you have to live? that stuff, right? And that's a spicy topic. That is immediately coming back into that thing of like, what am I pushing for? What am I striving for? What am I trying to achieve in this world? Um, and what's working there, but maybe it's, not really satisfying me, and what isn't working there and doesn't deserve my time anymore, doesn't deserve my energy anymore. That stuff. Okay. When we are working with a full moon in Gemini, we can either be activating and expanding and awakening and adorning, or we can be resting and nourishing and supporting or otherwise relaxing the shoulders, the elbows, the wrists, the arms, the armpits, our hands, our fingers. Those are all the parts of the body that are ruled by Gemini. Um, this is a great time. If I didn't already say this, let me say it. It's a great time for journaling. It's a great time for storytelling and listening to storytellers, which is something that we will talk about more at Yule. Storytelling is a big Yule practice. So very important time for that. But yes, this is the part of the body that we want to be either activating or nourishing, depends on how you like to work with the full moon. And uh, as I say every week, I am not a doctor of the human corpus. I am a doctor of the cosmos and the cauldron. So don't listen to me, a wild haired lady on the internet yelling about stuff. Go check in with your trusted health advisor to make sure that this information is appropriate and useful for you. And also remember that you can always work with the metaphor. So, is there something within arm's reach, metaphorically, that needs your attention? Is there something that you are holding or carrying metaphorically that maybe needs to be assessed or put down, etc., etc.? And for our plant body work at this time of year, a lot of our plant friends have gone quiet, especially outdoors. A lot of our plant friends have gone dormant or have died off for the year. And so the work that we want to be doing is, for our winter, our late fall and winter producing plants, we want to do harvesting at this time. But we might want to be doing some weeding. We might want to be doing a little plowing. I definitely encourage pest control, obviously looking for mold and mildew and things like that that might be forming as the weather continues to change. And if it's right for your plants, if you haven't already, this could be a really good time for pruning your plants in lieu of winter storms that will be coming in shortly, as well as to encourage above ground strength and fortitude. Okay, that's everything that I want to say about this full moon, I think. Yeah. If not, I'll probably interrupt myself later and mention something else because that's what I do. But now let's get into the rest of the week. All right, once again this week, I am changing up how I am delivering the information to you because I'm unhinged and I can't be stopped. And you're not going to stop me. So, or maybe you are. I don't know. So let's just roll through the week. We're going to start with Wednesday, December 7th. As we talked about, we have our full moon in Gemini. We have the sun in Sagittarius opposing Mars retrograde in Gemini at 16 degrees. We've already talked about all of that stuff. Okay, so what else do we have happening on Wednesday the 7th? We have running from December 7th through 17th, the Geminids or Geminids meteor showers. These this year are basically in conjunction with the full moon. So while the moon is in the sky, it's going to be difficult to see any of those meteor showers until we get a little further out from the full moon. After the 13th or 14th, towards the end of the meteor shower, it might be a lot easier, and or before the moon comes up or after the moon goes down. Check your local listings. Most of the like weather websites and timeanddate.com and places like that will have information about meteor showers. if and when they are visible in your area, and what part of the sky to be looking at to see which direction the stars should be shooting from. So you can check that out. Also, on this day, running from December 7th through 20th, approximately, from our Hopi and Zuni friends and ancestors, we have the Festival of Shalako. This is dedicated to Salakmana, or the Shalako Maiden. And this is a Kachina who is responsible for bringing in the clouds and the lightning and the rains of abundance that are going to pour down during winter season and make the soil nice and prosperous for us for the growth cycle next year. She wears a corn cob across her forehead and refers to really productive crops and harvests and all of that good stuff. Kachinas are really incredible deities or entities. They kind of dwell in a really interesting space spiritually. And if you're not familiar with Hopi or Zuni religion, I highly recommend checking out some books. I would definitely recommend Hopi Visions, Journey of the Human Spirit by Kimberly Jones, as a place to start on learning about Kachina. They're really, really cool entities. Yeah, okay, moving on to December 8th. We have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Ras Al Gheti. And I don't have a whole heck of a lot to say about this fixed star. Um, Sometimes I can find a lot of myth and information on the fixed stars, and sometimes it's just very generic, like this is this, that is that, and it's a few sentences and that's it. And it's always funny because in my gut, I feel like I'm missing something. You know what I mean? I'm like, I know it's just there, and like I'm not seeing it, or I'm not hearing what it is that the author is saying in between the lines. I don't know. It's mad scientist syndrome, probably. But Ras Al Gheti is found in the constellation of Hercules, and it is the star itself means the head of the kneeler. Meaning the one who kneels, aka Hercules, who is depicted kneeling down. And what I did think was interesting is that Hercules is a character that is very prominent in the myth of Chiron. Now, we're not necessarily talking about Chiron too much this week. We do have one transit to Chiron this week. But Chiron is a centaur, and Sagittarius is a centaur. And so, is there something there, right? But the only little pieces of information that I got about this star is that there's an energy of boldness around this star, and that certainly complements the work that we're doing with our full moon. And a suggestion that there is something holy about kneeling, that we all kneel at one point or another. Especially if we're getting up to some kinky stuff, right? But that's all I've got for you. That's all I've got for you on the fixed star of this date. Okay, what else is happening Thursday, December 8th? Astrologically, nothing to speak of. So looking at, I will say this, the moon moves into Cancer. We're not going to talk about it, but the moon moves into Cancer. We have Consuelia number 2 from our Roman friends and ancestors. If you remember last week, in the Lunar Week 42, we talked about Consuelia number 1. So this is a multi-day festival from our Roman friends and ancestors. And this is connected to Ceres, Ops, Tellus Mater, and other grain-producing goddesses. And so this is really sort of a worshipping or a festival honoring the containers, the silos, and the stored grain itself, which is kind of like the embodiment of all of this stored energy that has been pulled in from the harvest, which is now done. From our Buddhist friends and ancestors, we have Bodhi Day. This is December 8th every year. And this is the day that Gautama Buddha reaches enlightenment. And we have already seen, are seeing, and we will continue to see as we approach winter solstice, more and more deities that are concerned with enlightenment, receiving enlightenment, delivering enlightenment, or birthing a deity who is an embodiment of enlightenment, or even themselves, the deity, being an embodiment of enlightenment, wisdom, law, truth, that type of stuff. From our Catholic friends and ancestors, we have the Immaculate Conception of Mary. Not sure if you're familiar with that whole thing. She has a son named Jesus. It's a whole deal. But that's happening, right? And the Immaculate Conception is another moment of recognizing the inherent holiness of this deity or this being. From our Yoruba friends and ancestors, we have the festival of Iroko. Iroko is a orisha that is dedicated to abundance and prosperity, and also lives in a tree, and the tree itself is the Iroko tree. And the tree itself is a symbol of abundance and prosperity. It's always a blessing to have one planted or grow on your property, and all of that good stuff. Also on this day, from our from our Japanese friends and ancestors, we have the festival of Harikuyo, which is the mass for broken needles. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It is a mass for needles that have broken in in while being worked, while things were being sewn and repaired and the needle broke. And it's a way of saying thank you to the tools that we use in our life, especially the stuff that's small and mundane. So if you don't have any broken needles laying around the house to say thank you to, that's legit. You can also say thanks to the needles that haven't broken, but you can also say thanks to, your pots and pans, your spatulas, the toilet paper holder, that kind of stuff, right? The tools that live in your house that make it possible for you to kind of live your everyday life in your home. This is a really nice time to say thank you to those entities. And this isn't the only time that this is celebrated. This is actually celebrated a couple of different times in the different prefectures of Japan. So different regions of Japan will celebrate this holiday at different times. Okay, moving on to Friday, December 9th, starting off with our astrology of that day. We have Venus in Sagittarius square Jupiter in Pisces at 29 degrees, the very last degree of Pisces. And then just a couple of hours later, Venus moves into Capricorn. So let's talk about that. It's a square. Oh no, doesn't matter. Venus and Jupiter are the two party starters of the chart. They are always happy to hang out with each other. It doesn't matter if it's a square, if it's an opposition, it doesn't matter. This energy is fun. It's flirtatious. This could be a great day for shopping, though, because it's a square, watch your money. They tend to get a little out of hand sometimes. This is a fantastic time to go enjoy some art, go enjoy some nature. This is also a really good time to do some magic work, some spiritual work. So again, on that note from our full moon of asking for messages from our guides, our deities, our ancestors, our gods and goddesses. This is another moment of that. Jupiter is a representation of the gods and goddesses in total. And so astrologically, this is a great time for asking for that kind of information or doing that kind of work. And then, as I said, a couple of hours later, Venus moves into Capricorn. And Venus is fine in Capricorn. It's maybe not their favorite place to be because Venus is like, woo, let's have fun and put ruffles on stuff and make it, shiny with glitter. And Capricorn is like, excuse me, we need to get down to work. Okay. Like, I will allow a small amount of glitter, but that's all. And so how this is great is that this is more support for manifestation. Venus moving into Capricorn gets a little bit more serious, a little more mature, a little more introspective, but it's grounding that energy. And I think that this is a really nice piece of energy when we think about some of the stuff that's going on with the full moon, a couple days before, where for some folks, that full moon energy might be feeling agitated or scattered or very impatient. Venus moving into Capricorn, I think, helps ground that energy a little bit and kind of mellow us out a little bit more and kind of help us be like, okay, it's cool. I can sit here and like deal with this for a while and just like do my thing that needs to get done. On the holy day front, we have from our Greek friends and ancestors slash our modern pagan friends and ancestors a feast to Athena. Athena is yet another goddess, deity, entity that is an embodiment of truth, law, wisdom, enlightenment, all of that good stuff that we have been talking about for several weeks now. And why I say this is from our Greek ancestors as well as our modern pagan friends and ancestors is because the Greeks didn't have days that were locked in, you know. Uh, this is a holiday that I have not really been able to find historical evidence for. I cannot find a specific day in December or Poseidiana, Poseidonica, whatever the name of the Greek month is that we're in right now, that is specifically dedicated to Athena. It's a lot of stuff dedicated to harvest deities and production deities, food and earth deities. But uh, symbolically, it makes sense, right? Because we have all these other enlightenment entities that are hanging out right now. So I think that this is a holiday that is specifically from our modern Wheel of the Year calendars. As people have gotten more and more into studying the Wheel of the Year, which is what we're talking about here on the podcast, we have seen on the internet a surge of calendars appear, and some of them have some historical relevance, some do not. And does that matter? I don't know, right? Like, does it matter? Do you think that the gods are really going to be put out if they're revered on the wrong day? Maybe, right? I'm not going to speak for all pantheons. I'm not going to speak for all deities everywhere. I bet there's probably some deities that are mad if they're worshipped on the wrong day, or fussy about it, right? But I would expect that there are probably some deities who don't mind, or who like literally don't care at all. And our modern Wheel of the Year calendars, I think, are a really cool attempt at understanding the symbolism, understanding the spirit of the times, and finding ways to venerate deities that speak to that stuff, especially when we can't find the historical record, right? Maybe it has been obliterated, maybe it has been erased, maybe it is hidden currently, and that information is not accessible right now. We don't necessarily want to not venerate that deity. We want to take whatever chance we can get. So why not have a feast for Athena on this day? Let's do it. My guess is she's not going to mind, especially if there's plenty of butter on the bread. All right, moving on to Saturday the 10th. We have no particular astrology of note for this day, but by my calendar, from our Roman friends and ancestors, Saturnalia begins. Yes, Saturnalia starting on a Saturday. You love to see it. Okay. Saturnalia is going to run from, depending on what calendars you are working with, big asterisk there, right? From the 10th to the 15th, or from the 10th to the 17th, or Saturnalia is not going to start until next Saturday, the 17th, and run through the 25th or the 23rd. So there are records that show Saturnalia was 5 days long. There are records that show that Saturnalia was 7 days long. There are records that show that Saturnalia was as long as it needed to be from a point in the lunar cycle, approximately the 17th day of the moon, which is what the Saturday the 10th is the 17th day of the moon. Running from there to a couple of days after winter solstice, or the winter solstice when it was marked on the 25th or the 24th versus the 21st or 20th. It gets a little gray. It's a little wibbly there, going back to 3,000 years in time. Sorry, I don't have my dates exactly accurate, or perfectly plotted out. But the idea of Saturnalia, and we're going to talk about this a lot more in the Yule class, so I'm not going to talk about it a whole lot here. But the idea of Saturnalia was basically a time out of time that was this non time that existed after the end of the last year and before the beginning of the next year. And the beginning of the next year started with winter solstice. Or, depending on what era of Greece or Rome we're talking about, it was the start of the new moon, the first moment it was visible after the winter solstice. And that could be a long time, depending on when the new moon actually showed up, right? So Saturnalia was sort of thought of as this time out of time. Lots of cool traditions and etc. at all. Again, not going to get into it here. You're going to have to come to the class to hear more about Saturnalia. But know that we're kind of stepping into that very nebulous space that is at the end of the calendar year-ish, the end of the solar year, where time and numbers start to just kind of not really matter anymore because it's really sort of a waiting game until the sun does that thing. And then the moon does that thing. And then the whole process starts up and begins again. Uh, Fun stuff. Super exciting. Also on this day, we have this is Saturday the 10th, we have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Sabik. This fixed star is found in the constellation Ophiuchus, and this is another knee star, right? So Ras Al Ghethi was a knee or the head of the kneeler, uh, Hercules, and now Sabik is the knee of Ophiuchus. It also connects us to a concept that we've been talking about over the last few weeks. Talked about it in Lunar Week 41 and 42. The pasture. And the pasture is sort of this place in the sky that Babylonians referred to as basically the abyss. It was sort of like the darkness, and then within the darkness was this pasture, and then within the pasture is the tree of light here in the center of the darkness. Um, Tying together a lot of pretty potent imagery that we are working with at this time of year. I don't know. Is there a tree? There's a thing with trees at this time of year, right? Like that's kind of a big deal with this winter holiday thing, isn't it? Yeah. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. All right. Moving on to Sunday the 11th, we have our disseminating moon in Leo at 5 degrees. That hits the degree at 10:40 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, later in the day / the next day for everybody else around the planet. And when we're working with our disseminating moon in Leo, this is the phase that comes right after the full moon. Our metaphor that we work with when we're talking about the lunar process is that at the full moon, the fruit appears on the vine. And at the disseminating moon, the fruit ripens. In other words, some shit may come to light at the full moon, for better or worse. It develops, and the consequences of that stuff, or how that all is going to play out, begins to reveal itself at the disseminating moon a few days later. That's often the way that the lunar process will work every month. And so when we're working with this disseminating moon in Leo, the real encouragement here is to step into walking your talk. It's not about telling people what kind of life you're going to lead. It's not about telling people how they should be living their life or trying to correct people or whatever. It's about literally just embodying your values. And part of why I love that is because that is another really great metaphor for Venus in Capricorn, embodying your values, embodying Earth sign Capricorn values Venus. So now we have this disseminating moon in Leo that's like, yes, let me double down on that. And, we've already gotten that message from this full moon conjunct Mars in Gemini. Walk the talk, right? Don't just talk about it, live it, be about it. In the words of a great saint, Dr. Frankenfurter, don't dream it, be it. If you're old enough to know about Rocky Horror Picture Show, then you know what I'm talking about here. And if you haven't seen Rocky Horror Picture Show, I'm jealous because the best hour and a half of your life is still in front of you. So go check out that movie. Is it a little problematic? I don't know. Depends on how you want to look at it. I'll just say that. Okay. So this is really, I mean, that's really all I have to say about this moon is don't talk the talk, walk the talk. Be the thing that you want to see in the world. Lead through your actions. Um, and and if you are in some type of a leadership role in your life, and I know that many of you are, this is not a time to necessarily step out in front and lead the group. This is a time to connect with other groups and not just connect with their leaders, but connect with their groups and connect your group to those groups in whatever way makes sense for you, right? I don't know exactly what that means for you in your life, but if you're in a leadership role, now is a really great time to get together with your group, walk your talk, and bring your group into cahoots with other groups and see what they're doing, exchange ideas, all that good stuff. Okay. When we have our disseminating moon in Leo, we are resting, we are restoring, we're nourishing, supporting, or otherwise relaxing the back, the heart, the circulation system, and the blood itself. And again, as I always say, not a doctor. So if that doesn't make sense for you, if that's not safe or right for you, work with the metaphor. Is there metaphorically something you need to get off your back? Something that you need to get off your heart? Is there something circulating in your system? Is there something that's boiling your blood? Right? That stuff, right? We can still work with the metaphor. It still makes sense. And this is another moon where harvesting, doing pest control, disease control, or doing plowing or pruning or weeding is appropriate. But this time it's going to be for below ground support. So supporting the root systems and supporting the soil health around our plants because, of course, our moon is waning. Um, what else do we have going on this day? Sunday the 11th, we have a couple of holy days. Eponalia, which is the second day of Saturnalia. We'll talk about it in class. We also have a festival to Aaronrod. Aaronrod is a goddess from the Welsh system. Witchy lady, witchy goddess, for sure, for sure. And this is also something that I'm going to save for the Yule class because there is a constellation that is connected with this goddess. But I want you to remember the stuff that we're talking about this week in the podcast with our fixed stars. Just make a little note of that. It's going to come back around for us. Okay. Moving on to Monday the 12th. We have the sun in Sagittarius sextile Saturn in Aquarius at 20 degrees, as well as Mercury entering its retrograde shadow at 9 degrees of Capricorn. Okay. Not a whole lot to say about the Mercury retrograde shadow moment. We're going to talk about it as we get closer to it. You know what's up with Mercury retrogrades. We don't need to, you know what's up, man. But it's hitting the shadow right now. Okay. So talking about this Sun sextile Saturn situation, this is a fantastic day for administrative shits, is literally what I wrote in my notes. It's a really good day for grounding energy. It's a fantastic day for catching the details that may have slipped through the crack in that last week if the energy was a little too wackadoo. This is a really great day to make sure that you have dotted your I's, that you have crossed your T's. It's a great day for just getting down to business and getting shit done. Buttoning stuff up, taking care of business, paying off bills, all of that kind of stuff. boring, administrative, but it's what keeps the whole system going, right? Making sure that we've got the dishes done and the laundry folded and all of that kind of crap. That's We're about it all day, Monday the 12th. For our holy days on this day, we have from our Latinx Catholic friends and ancestors, Our Lady of Guadalupe. This is another iteration of the Virgin Mary. We're going to see a lot of Virgin Mary holidays at this time of year. Not sure if you're familiar, but it's kind of a thing. And that's pretty much all we've got for Monday the 12th. Tuesday the 13th, this is the Yule class. Yule class, Wheel of the Year. Check it out. Okay. Join us on YouTube for the live stream. Also, from our pagan and Catholic friends and ancestors, we have another feast dedicated to Saint Lucia. We had a feast last week as well. This is Saint Lucia and Saint Lucy on the same day. A saint dedicated to light, kind of a thing at this time of year, that the light is dying and then coming back. Moving into Wednesday, December 14th, our moon moves into Virgo. I'm not going to talk about it until next week when we have our half moon in Virgo, but just know that the energy shifts a little bit. And astrologically, we have the sun in Sagittarius square Neptune in Pisces at 22 degrees. We also, on that same day, have Mercury in Capricorn square Chiron retrograde in Aries at 11 degrees. And this is going to possibly be a tough day energetically. Anytime we have a square to or from Neptune, it kind of taps our energy. It taps our give a shit power. We might be feeling a little sluggish, might be feeling a little bummed. It might be difficult to focus. And so another encouragement to kind of take advantage of that Sun sextile Saturn moment on Monday. Neptune can bring up anxiety for people, low productivity. It might be hard to pay attention. It might be hard to stay focused on stuff. So be a little cautious, drive a little slower, read the fine print a couple times, just slow down. Don't take risks if it's possible to kind of avoid them, that sort of stuff. And then with Mercury square Chiron, this can be a day that you or all of us may receive some tough information. Some painful memories might be coming up from the past. Bad news might be rolling in for whatever reason. If we are able to work with this energy in a healing way, it can be really healing around that tough information that's coming in. Like, that was hard to hear, but I'm glad that I know it, kind of a moment. It might be a day where things that have gone unsaid are now finally being said, and we were holding back, or they were holding back because this was painful or difficult information. That kind of stuff. Not a great day for gossiping. I wouldn't gossip on this day. I wouldn't trade in gossip. If people want to talk to you, okay, cool, but you don't necessarily need to listen or answer back in any way. And as I always say, if shit gets weird, take a walk around the block, put yourself in timeout, take a moment, take a nap, make sure you have a snack, stay hydrated, and keep your mouth shut. Sometimes it's like the best way to just ensure the peace and keeping it cute, right? All right. Also on this day, we have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Ras Al Haig. This is also found in the constellation Ophiuchus, and this is the head of the serpent collector, but also sometimes it's called the head of the serpent charmer. So, interesting thing there. And again, in the last couple of weeks, we've talked about the serpent handler, collector, charmer, whatever their name is. Ophiuchus, this constellation that has caused a little bit of trouble in modern astrology, but not really. And the ongoing metaphor of finding the medicine inside the poison. So here is yet another fixed star that's about that conversation. That's kind of that ongoing conversation. And the head of this person, right? So where the knowledge is stored. But again, sort of, to me, a vague hat tip to that idea of enlightenment, truth, wisdom, of Athena, right? Born from Zeus's head, all of that stuff. Maybe I'm mashing that together. Maybe I'm projecting that on. I'll totally be honest about that. But that's what I'm seeing in that combination of symbolism. Um, this star also is connected to the pasture. So, that darkness that has a light at the center of it. That thing. Yeah. Interesting stuff. It's like, ooh, I love it. It's so cool. And our holy days on this day from our Roman friends and ancestors, we have the feast of Opalia. This is also called, um, let me see if I can find it in my notes. The other name for this holiday is Opiconsivia, which definitely rolls into our Consuelia or Concilia holiday that we were talking about earlier. And this is another holiday dedicated to the goddess Ops, who is all about that grain. And that the storage of grain, sort of the storing up of that energy that was harvested earlier this year. Also, on this day, from our Tibetan friends and ancestors, we have a feast dedicated to the goddesses of light and fire. And it's pretty straightforward. I don't have a whole lot of information about this. I have this in my notes. I'll be very straightforward. I have this in my notes, and I've talked about it in the past, and I know I found it somewhere, but I have not been able to find in my billions of bookmarks a website that talks specifically about this. So I don't know exactly where I found this, but it certainly suits the time of year that we're that we're working with, right? We have all of these light deities that are being born or being ushered in or about to start to show up, right? We had Lux Mundi last week. And fire, well, it's Sagittarius season, but also the fiery sun, all of that good stuff. So take it with a grain of salt. Include it in your calendar if you want to, but I do. So that's that. Okay. Last day of our lunar week, Thursday the 15th. This is my birthday, and I will be getting up to, I don't know what, honestly. I don't know what I'm doing for my birthday. Thank you to everybody who has reached out and asked. I really appreciate it. If I do figure out something, I'll post it. I'll post it at least on Patreon and let you guys know. Like, come meet me at this place. Like, let's hang out, right? Why not? But other than that, we don't have anything super exciting happening with our moon. It's still in Virgo. Side note, and we'll talk about this more next week. But when the moon is in Virgo, leave your plants alone. Don't touch them. And the moon is waning. So it's a great time to clear out your plants, clean up around your plants. But leave your plants alone. No trimming, no pruning, just leave them alone. No fertilizing, no nothing. Maybe doing a little composting, but that's about it. For our astrology on this day, we have Mercury in Capricorn trine the North Node in Taurus at 12 degrees. And any time that we are hanging out with Mercury trine the North Node, this is absolutely going to be a day where messages and information are there. Operators are standing by to take your call. This is a fantastic day to be asking for information from your guides, your ancestors, your gods, your goddesses, to check in with mentors, to check in with teachers, to check in with people who and wisdom sources around you, whether those are living entities or not. It's a really fantastic day to read holy writings, consider like magical and holy poetry, very potent, and also to write those things, to do some journaling on this day, right? Both of these planets or points, I should say, the node is not a planet, it's a point in the sky, but they're both in earth signs. So it isn't just about thinking about it, it's about doing it. And manifesting it in the physical world. So a really great day to do magical writing, journaling. You might do some anything along those lines. You make a magical journal, even if you don't actually write in it. Um, Anything along those lines, I think, is really, really potent work for us on that day. And last but not least, for our holy days, Excuse me. That was my straw. Sorry. From our Roman friends and ancestors, we have the festival of Sigillaria. This is another festival that is, in some ways, connected to Saturnalia, but it's actually a very, very old Roman holiday or festival where folks would create out of clay statues or embodiments of um, gods and goddesses and give them to each other as gifts. So all around the world throughout time, right? We're interacting with the gods on this day for sure, for sure. Like there's just no getting away from it. Um, so that's our lunar stuff for the week. That's our fixed stars for the week. That's our astrology for the week, and that is those are whatever our holy days for the week. So let me scooch directly into now talking about our tarot and our magic that we might be working with this week. For tarot, I'm going to bring us back again to the Eight of Wands. I feel like it is yet another week that it's really potent to work with this particular tarot helper. Um, and I think that, focusing on this idea of fire in service to spirit. And I know I said that at the beginning of Sagittarius season, that Eight of Wands was a card to work with. Again, like I'm saying, I think that this is a week where it emphasizes it partly because the Eight of Wands is connected to Mercury in Sagittarius, and this is our Gemini full moon in Sagittarius, ruled by Mercury. But also because of all of the work that we're doing this week with our moon and with our astrology around, really getting clear on what it is that we want in our life and what it is we don't want in our life anymore. And, if I'm asking myself, what are my goals? What are my long-term values? What are the values I want to embody? What is the talk that I'm trying to walk? Right? What better of an overarching idea to sort of encompass all of that other than fire, or the fire of my soul, right? The fire of my being, the fire of my character, if we are atheist, and we don't work with the concept of a soul, the fire of my being in service to spirit or the collective or the greater good, right? What could be more profound and more holy and more appropriate than that? I don't know. Don't ask Elon Musk. Um, but that's how I'm seeing it. I'm seeing this as a card that can really help us stay on the course, right? Even if, and maybe especially if, we're having a hard time answering the question of where am I trying to head? What do I want out of life? Who am I? Where am I going? What's this all about? I think this is a week of emptying out old answers to those questions, not necessarily inviting in new answers to those questions. It's a full moon. It's a culmination point. The new moon in 2 weeks is going to be a place to come back around to the inviting in new answers to that question. And so as I'm emptying out old answers, right? What passes muster here? Um uh Is it in service to the greater good? Is it in service to spirit? Is it in service to the collective? Yes or no, right? It's going to be pretty straightforward, yes or no. It's okay if I still get mine, I think, I hope, right? I think it's okay that we all still get what we need and what we want. It's okay to want things. That's the point of Mars is to desire stuff, is to want stuff. We shouldn't just need things. I think it's okay to want things too. But is that in alignment with what's okay for everybody else, right? Am I wanting to the detriment of the group? Then maybe I need to check my wants. And that's what this Mars retrograde is giving us an opportunity to do. This, big long period of our Mars retrograde. So I feel like the Eight of Wands is really here to help us. We also might work with the King of Wands. By some magical systems, The King of Wands is thought of as the heir of fire, the court card that sort of discusses the idea of the heir of fire. Other magical systems would pick a different card. So I'll throw that in there. This is not absolute. But for me, kings are about endings. For other people, when they work with kings and tarot, it's about a culmination. It's like the best of the best, the peak of the peak, the top of the top. For me, those are the queens. Those are the queens. And so the kings are like what comes after perfection? What comes after I've done the most, right? What comes after I win the race? What comes next? Um, and so here, I think also our King of Wands is here to really help us parse through, like, oh yeah, I wanted that, but do I still want that? Does that still make sense for me? I got what I wanted, and I'm still not entirely satisfied. Now what? And 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 so the King of Wands, I think, is here to help us let go of those roles, let go of those desires that no longer serve us. Think about all the things that we have learned about ourselves as individuals and ourselves as a species over the last couple of years. Right? Think about all that. Now, come back to this answer, right? Or come back to this question of what am I actually trying to do with this life? That thing. And that's why I think the Eight of Wands is here to help us, and the King of Wands is also here to help us to stay focused on what is going to be, the best for the greatest good, and also what is no longer serving me, what is no longer serving the collective that I don't want to embody anymore. I don't want to play that role anymore. That is not appropriate. That is not a torch I am carrying any longer. I did for a while, cool, great, but we are moving on from that now. And so help me let go of that thing. Even if it was successful for me in the past, let me let go of that thing because it's not necessarily what's right for me and us in the future. For our magic this week, again, I think magical journaling this week could be really, really important, especially as a means of divination, communing with ancestors to ask for wisdom, to ask for guidance, to receive messages this week, all of that stuff. All very in alignment with the magic that we do during Samhain season, and all very in alignment with our holy days, our fixed stars, and our astrology that we have this week. So layers on layers, really, this week, kind of pointing us to, they'll never know if you don't ask, right? That kind of stuff. Okay. And I think that's it. That's our podcast for the week. So very quickly, I'm going to run back through the astrology super quick. Wednesday the 7th, 16 degrees of Gemini. We have our full moon at 8:08 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thursday, and also on that same day, we have the Sun in Sagittarius opposing Mars retrograde in Gemini at 16 degrees. Thursday, the moon moves into Cancer. Friday the 9th, we have Venus in Sagittarius square Jupiter in Pisces at 29 degrees, and then Venus moves into Capricorn. Saturday the 10th, nothing. Sunday the 11th, at 10:40 p.m., we have our disseminating moon at 5 degrees of Leo. Obviously, earlier in that day, the moon moves into Leo. Monday the 12th, we have the Sun in Sagittarius sextile Saturn in Aquarius at 20 degrees. Tuesday the 13th, nothing, except, of course, the Yule class. Be there or be square or don't or whatever. I don't know. Be there. No, be there. Join me. Join me. Okay. Wednesday the 14th, we have the moon moving into Virgo. And then later that morning, we have the Sun in Sagittarius square Neptune in Pisces at 22 degrees. Remember to eat some food and drink some water. And later that night, we have Mercury in Capricorn square Chiron retrograde in Aries at 11 degrees. And Thursday the 15th, we have Mercury in Capricorn trine the North Node in Taurus at 12 degrees. All right, my friends, that is your weekly Spinning the Wheel podcast. Thanks for joining me once again. I hope I see you in class. If not, I hope I see you in the streets. Uh, but if not, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Um, don't be afraid to let go of things that have been working, sort of, in lieu of opening your hands to accept something that might work even better, but is unfamiliar. Be brave, be bold. It's what Mars is asking of us right now, is to be brave and to be bold. It is time to grasp the serpent behind the head and find the medicine in the poison. Blessed be.